you believe it? Welcome to episode 30 of the Picky Bastards podcast. The podcast where Fran is wrong and Fran is also wrong. Welcome to Matt. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm great.
How is the lockdown? How's the lockdown beard growth going, Matt? Hipster or mountain man?
I actually had a trim yesterday, so it's I'm looking pretty sharp at the moment.
Back to hipster.
If I do say so myself, yeah.
And Fran, hello
Fran.
Fran.
You sharp. Hi, how you doing? I'm not wrong, but okay.
You are always wrong. Hipster or mountain man then? What's the beard status currently?
I can't stop touching my face, so I keep shaving it, thinking that might make me stop touching my face, but then I continue to touch the stubble instead of the
So it makes absolutely no difference then.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna give up and touch my face.
Okay, go for it.
Touching my face right now, actually. Don't take my advice, people, but I'm touching my face.
That's probably good advice to avoid, yeah. So, today we are going to discuss 5 new albums, and the albums are Porridge Radio's Every Bad, Childish Gambino's 3:15:20, Brooke Bentham's Everyday Nothing, Jessie Reyez, is it? Before Love Came to Kill Us, and the classic is Neil Young's Harvest. And I will be discussing why I love the horrors with a playlist. I have a couple of extremely sensible questions to ask.
Terrible questions.
Ask from Matt. I'll start, though, I think, with Matt's question first. This is your very sensible question. Which track, Matt, had the best lyric, and what was it?
I think these are good questions, but you purposely gave them to the opposite people.
Yeah.
I really did. That's absolutely right.
Because I don't really listen to music for lyrics. I listen for the way it makes me feel. And so this was really hard.
You don't listen to music for lyrics?
No. It's always been that way. Like,
get off this podcast.
You're a book boy. You like the words. If it has good lyrics. If it has good lyrics, I'm in it. But
I now understand why you like some of the shit bands you like.
Yeah, I can see that as well. That really does sell you short, man, I'm afraid. Not to like lyrics at all. Come on.
I do like lyrics. They're not first and foremost. I have to dig. And so I struggled with this, but I went with probably the most overt lyrics. And that's with Porridge Radio, Every Bad.
Okay.
And I specifically pulling out Lilac. They have this, like all of their lyrics, it seems they repeat over and over again, so it's not hard for me. I'm not going to miss it.
It's at your lyrical level is what you're basically saying.
There's about 7 lyrics in each song, so yeah. Well done.
But I think I really appreciate the sentiment behind one set of lyric, which is, I don't want to get bitter, I want us to get better, I want us to be kinder.
To ourselves and to each other.
Yeah.
I didn't write down his most memorable lyric in the whole set of albums.
I didn't write down the whole thing, but I knew it.
You just left the last sentence off. Just put 3 dots instead, did you?
But I really like the sentiment behind this, and I think it's interesting the way they use lyrics in this. Like initially, the first pass, I did actually find it kind of annoying, the repetitive nature, but then they became almost chants in these songs to really drive home key points. And I also think that the way they say them changes over throughout the song, even though it is repeating, and it becomes different, and there's a different tone. And so in this case, it felt like it started off as like a desperate plea, and then it ended more euphoric. And so that I kind of liked a lot. And generally, I liked this album. It has a lot of the best parts, I think, of like indie rock. You've got like some pretty like addictive riffs. It's quite simple and accessible, like me. And it has emotional touch points, but it doesn't go too deep. And then the other part I really like is just this kind of toing and throwing, specifically between like the main vocalist and the backing vocalist. I think it adds a lot of dimensions to what could be some pretty straightforward songs. It adds an extra level to them. And then they play with tempo a little bit, so there's a lot of stop starting and getting fast and heavy, and then having these quiet, spacious moments. I think Sweet is a good example of that. But all in all, it was there's kind of a range of different styles of songs, but I think they're all held together quite nicely. They have a coherent style. That said, when I first listened to this album, I absolutely loved it, and over time, it became a like. I think that's because it is a bit more simple. It became just a little dull, but it's probably the one I listen to more than any other on the playlist.
Okay, wow. All right, Matt. Fran, what do you reckon?
So a lot of what Matt said similar to what I'm going to say, but slightly different in respect that for me, I was really into this record straight away, and that kind of bothered me a little bit. I was worried because usually when I fall in love with an album, it's an album that's grown on me.
I totally see that. I've had that happen to me before many times.
Yeah. And so I was thinking, what's going to put me off? And because of that, I started looking for what might be problems with the album. And Matt's just talked about the repetitiveness, and that did at first bother me a little bit. I think there's a lot of songs on this album that rely on very few words repeated again and again, but in the end, I don't think that is a problem. I think it makes the music really hypnotic. I think the singer, Donna Margolin name is just incredibly captivating. I love the way she can sort of switch from a whisper to a snarl really quickly. And I think she really knows, it's a bit similar to what you were saying, Matt, about how it changes the way she says things. I think she really knows how to draw you into a song. Yeah. And one of the things, again, similar to something Matt just said, that I found really fascinating was the way they use her vocals and the instrumentation as a kind of call and response rather than being melded together. So there'll be really quiet spoken word sections with really bare instrumentation and then just suddenly a cacophony of noise from the rest of the band. And then they meld together as the song goes on, which I thought was really clever. I think Sweet, which also Matt mentioned, is probably the best example of that, and I think one of the best songs here. I also really liked Long, I liked Lilac, and I really liked Give Take. I think her droll vocal performance on that last one's amazing. And yeah, I really like the song Don't Ask Me Twice as well, and the question Nick's about to ask me is related to tone, and the tone on that song was fantastic. I thought the crunchy guitars at the start are really, really good. So yeah, I really like this album a lot. I bought it on record. Yeah, big fan.
Okay.
In the end.
Cool.
So, despite Matt's admission that he's inept when it comes to knowing anything about lyrics, I'm still shocked to discover that he put Porridge Radio as his best lyric out of these albums, given the selection we have. This is shockingly weak lyrically. It's unbelievable. And I know you both talked about the repetition. I know you both talked about the repetition and the tone and the sort of change in her tone, which I thought was not as impressive as I've heard from many other people before. But I'd just like to see if you can guess how many times she says, "Thank you for making me happy" in Born Confused, the opening song. Can you guess? Because I took the trouble to actually sit there and count them in my rage.
Fucking hell, mate. Lockdown was really...
Did you say 35, Matt?
Yeah.
Wow, 36 times. That's almost called it. 36 repetitions of one freaking line. And in Lilac... That phrase you just referred to, that phrase you just candidly didn't quote correctly, Matt, on Lilac, was actually repeated for over 2 minutes of one song. I mean, it's astonishing that she can get away with it. Frankly, I think the tonal changes, as I mentioned, are not that impressive. I mean, I think she sings reasonably well, but it's not enough difference to carry that amount of repetition, which just becomes grating. So. I will say that my first early listens, I found it fairly annoying, and then as it went on, I found it incredibly annoying. So it's just a lyrical nightmare. I think musically it was decent. It was okay. I think I probably could have enjoyed it if it hadn't been for that massive sort of hurdle I had to get over to get to that. So so I think the impression I have is that she thinks that the words she's saying are incredibly important. There's a lot of weight on each individual phrase. And some of the phrasing is interesting, but again, I don't think "thank you for making me happy" is enough weight in that phrase to be worth the rest of that 36 repetitions.
But it's the context of the song and the way in which she's saying it, and the sort of, I think a lot of it, I don't think that she does put a lot of weight or importance. I think there's a lot of sarcasm in her delivery and in her vocals, and I think the point of thank you for making me happy, I think it's quite well done. I think I don't mind that it's there 36 times. I could have probably done another 12 times quite happily. So.
But not 13 times, that would have crossed the line, is it?
No, that would have been too yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's all I got to say on Porridge Radio. I was.
Did you read Pete's review on Picky Bastard's website? I think you and him would be in agreement there.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
he hated it, didn't it? I didn't really like publishing that because I scheduled that review and I didn't really like doing it because I really like the album. But,
no, I thought you made a lot of good
It's not all about me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know that.
Balance it out.
Yeah. 2 out of 3 then, basically. Yeah, so not too bad, I suppose, for them.
Okay. So when Nick said I was wrong at the start, it's 2-1 here, which means you're wrong. So
I'm not sure if maths equates to whether you're right or wrong. Really, basically you're both wrong. It's quite clear. Okay, so Fran, sensible question for you. Are you ready?
This fucking question.
Which track had the best guitar, bass, or synth tone? Please describe it in 3 words or less.
So what I did with this question was I picked my favourite lyrics, which were from Porridge Radio. No, I didn't really.
Oh.
So yeah, honestly, when you first asked me this question, Nick, I was pretty annoyed.
Well, that worked then.
Like what Matt said, as much as tone can be important to me once I know an artist, once I'm already invested in an album, it's rarely something that's sort of at the forefront of my mind when I'm getting to know an album. I think it probably plays into it without me really noticing it, but. Yeah, but actually, to be fair to you, when I started to listen with that in mind, it was quite an interesting exercise.
Oh, okay.
I'd been enjoying the Porridge Radio album, so I initially thought that would probably be where I would choose that from, and it was that song I mentioned earlier, which I've now forgotten the name of. But in the end, it was actually from the Jessie Reyez album, Before Love Came to Kill Us. And obviously it's going to be guitar tones because that's all I can really be asked to think about.
Wow.
I wasn't even going to try and think of a fucking synth tone.
Could you distinguish one from the other, I wonder?
I wouldn't know what a synth tone is. I mean, the tones I picked out that I'm saying guitar could be anything, to be honest. It might be a drum. I don't know.
Jesus Christ. What a professional.
But yeah, it could be... so there's 2 songs for me that I could have gone with here, and they were next to each other on the album. So the guitar tone on Intruders, which I've gone with the words smooth and gentle for you, Nick.
That's only 2 words, I'm sorry.
You said 3 words
gentle.
or less.
Okay,
said 3 words or less.
All right, fair enough. I'll let you.
And also smooth and gentle. That's 3 words. And then the clipped and high pitched guitar tone on the next song, Coffin. I thought were great. And I was already really enjoying this album before I started thinking of it in this light, but paying particular attention to the tone actually really made me think about why I was enjoying it so much. Now, obviously, it's an R&B album, but the more time I spent with it, the more I started to see the associations it has with folk music, a genre which I'm much more familiar with. I think a lot of the best songs here are built in similar ways to folk songs. The 2 I mentioned earlier, Intruding the Coffins, are 2 of my favourite. I also really love Imported and Killers. And I think with a few little tweaks, they could be folk songs. But it wasn't only those gentle, slower songs that I enjoyed. I liked the whole thing. I even got into Dope in the end, which I would say is pretty much a club track. And at first, I didn't know what was going on, and Kirsten came and looked at me weirdly when I was playing it. But I really got into it. I think the instrumentation across the piece is really good. I think her voice is great, and I think she uses auto-tune, but not all the time, and when she does use it, it is quite well used. So yeah, I was quite a big fan of this album, which I really didn't expect at first, and in the end, actually, I think I probably enjoyed it most on this list.
Okay. Well, first of all, you're welcome, because I've obviously introduced you to the concept of tone basically in that one question. So
yeah, well done.
Congratulations. Okay. So Matt, why don't you go next?
I like this a lot, but so I picked this because I really loved her previous 2 EPs, and so after loving her previous 2 EPs, I actually was a little bit disappointed with this album. I think it's really interesting you pick up on kind of the folky aspect, because thinking about it now, I totally see that, but I think it actually at times detracts sometimes away from her strengths.
Okay.
think she is best when she's really going for it, and she has this amazing voice. And some of the quieter songs and some of the more sparing songs don't necessarily play to that. That said, like some of the songs that have a kind of more folky structure, which are focused on showcasing her voice more, like Figures, are some of her best. I guess for me, the best songs on this are Imported and Figures, and this is why it's disappointing, because they're actually from her previous EPs.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah. So I'd never heard of it, so that obviously didn't bother me. But apparently, I think a few of the songs were from previous EPs, right?
Yeah. And so I was really excited to see her do a bunch of new music. I think she's hugely talented, and she's supporting like Billie Eilish on her stadium tour.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So like she's massive. So the fact that she didn't have a whole album of new music, but I guess it is her first really big album anyway, so I guess it makes sense that she.
Which songs did you pick out there? Was it? Did you say Imported was one of the?
Imported and Figures.
Yeah. See, if she hadn't put that on the album, I think it would be really lacking, because it's a great song, that. So.
Yeah. But there's a lot I do really like about this, like the way it starts. It's so bold. I almost picked favourite lyrics from here just because she can be so abrasive and quite funny at the same time.
Yeah. See, I really expected you to, so I was a bit worried about the fact that I'd picked the tone there, because I expected you to pick the lyrics here as well. But
but I would have just gone straight from Figures. Figures is one of my favourite songs of the year it came out, in like 2017. So I would have probably picked that. But the way the album starts with just "I Should Have Fucked Your Friends" is fantastic. It really sets the tone for the album. But yeah, I was I liked it. I liked it a lot. I just wanted more.
I didn't know anything about this situation that it was lifted from the EPs, and that is really disappointing, isn't it? I mean, I remember. This Welsh band Joy Formidable, do you remember them? Still around actually. They did an album after they'd released an EP, and it was basically only half an album. It was the whole EP again, which I thought was a pity, really. I know they have to get the distribution and the major label kind of, or the label to push them more assertively with a whole project like that. But it seems still like it's missing a trick, really, to have an opportunity to write loads of new stuff and to put in a load of older stuff. I mean, if you say Figures is 2017, that seems like we're not got the newest, the best stuff she could potentially deliver now if she's presumably improving, So.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for me, I did enjoy this in general, but I don't have tons to say. It came across as very. It's funny you say about her being quite abrasive. I came across quite smooth and digestible to me in lots of places. In fact, there were some songs that reminded me of Laura Kana a little bit. I don't know if you recognise that at all. For example, Intruders, I think that you mentioned.
I can see that, yeah. I can see that.
Has a bit of that Laura Kana tone to it.
Yeah.
And I think her vocals are, very strong. No question, she can carry a lot of musical stuff through that tone. I thought possibly the strongest vocals were actually on Coffin, which is another one you had mentioned, Fran. I will say I thought Eminem's feature was pretty forgettable on it, really. And I know we have different opinions on Eminem in general, but I was trying.
Oh mate, I don't think Eminem should be making music anymore. That's never. I love early Eminem. I think actually, to be fair, a couple of his more recent singles have been decent, but the last time I enjoyed an Eminem album was well over 15 years ago.
Okay.
So. Did you know she featured on his album, his last one?
No, I've not checked out that album, and actually I've heard good things about that, so I might spend some time with that at some point. But
I think she's on probably the worst tracks.
Okay.
Of a great selection, I'm sure. I just thought that, anyway, I thought that the Coffin was unfortunate because I thought she had the best vocals on the album in that track, and then his feature was, again, pretty flat and forgettable. So, I like Figures as well. So, I mean, it was very consistent for most of the album, but just, again, sort of slid past me slightly. It didn't really go for the throat, really. So, in that sense, I suppose that's the genre to some extent. It's quite chilled in a way.
I can really imagine you dancing around in your kitchen to Dope, though. I can see you getting really into that.
Yeah, that absolutely happened. I guarantee. So
you hated that song, didn't you? You must have hated Dope.
Yeah, that was the least good song on the album. Yes, you are right. You did call it on that one. Yeah, well done. But yeah, so I don't know. I haven't got tons more to say about it. I just felt like it was decent, solid. If I had been a fan, though, I would have been more frustrated than Matt evidently is about the fact that she'd released it before, because I wanted to carry through a whole new concept, really. But anyway, that's that. So shall we talk about which we got? We got 3 left, haven't we? What about talking about our favourite of the remaining ones?
Maybe. Who are you asking?
I'm asking Matt.
Oh shit. I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna go with Brooke Bentham.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's my favourite, but I'm gonna pick it because if I had the tone question, this is what I would have picked. There's specifically one song in this album that really, really grabbed me on my first listen, and that was Blue Light. I think the bass in it is fantastic. It just it comes in, it wanders around, but it's ever present and really ties the whole song together. And it really allows the guitar to just drift in and out of the song without you losing track of what's going on. And it really reminded me of Fleetwood Mac. The kind of the strength of the bass and the way that the guitars came in and out, and then the vocals were also coming in and out in a very. She sounds similar at times to. Oh God, I'm blanking.
Somebody else who's very good.
Stevie Nicks.
Stevie Nicks. Yeah. So, and then generally the album I liked. I think the biggest inhibition to me loving this album is for it as an album sounds like perfect walking or traveling music for me, to put my headphones on and commute to or something like that. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to go anywhere.
Now we all burst into tears when you raised that possibility.
And so I think that really prevented me from kind of liking the album to really liking it a lot more. And so I'll put this in my back pocket and I'll listen to it in 6 months from now. I think the main drawback for it really grabbing me is just there's a few songs that just are a bit too plodding, especially as the album got deeper and deeper. It just kind of I think because it's also on the same playlist as Porridge Radio, they almost overlap in styles. It's shoegazy at times. It just isn't as accessible, and I think it's done a disservice because of that.
I mean, they're nothing like each other, but
I'll go next before Frank can jump in and slay you about that opinion. Because to me, this album, this is what Porridge Radio wanted to be. I feel like there is an overlap as far as I'm concerned, Matt. You're right. And I think Porridge Radio's attempts are much better executed in the Brooke Bentham album. The sort of lush arrangements of kind of guitar tracks. It's a very pretty guitar heavy album. Sort of feels like they are staples in guitar terms, though they're not incredibly radical. But I think they work well. I think my favourite track on the album was "Keep It Near," probably. And again, it didn't totally blow me away. It wasn't like this is my albums of the year and top albums of the year or anything. But I think it was very very solid and very engaging. But I think actually it kept ringing bells to me, and I couldn't work out what it was for a long time. What album it sounded like, or what band it sounded like. And actually, I think it sounds quite a lot like Belly. I don't know if either of you are familiar with Belly.
No.
Tanya Donnelly's album, band she formed after Breeders. They're from the mid-90s. Okay. And this is a very 90s sound to me. This is what I mean about the guitar staples. It sounded a little bit dated in a way. I know that's sort of come around now to be cool again. But so it sounded a little bit sort of... I don't know if I'll come back to this album a hell of a lot, but it definitely made me intrigued to go back to Belly's album, which I used to love in the mid-90s, called Star, which is their first album. So yeah, it kind of drove an interesting conversation in my mind for a while there. And I do think I did enjoy it, but I don't know if I'll rush to come back to it, whenever I I'm looking for a new album again. So yeah, Fran, what do you reckon?
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So for a while, I didn't really feel like this album stood out particularly. Felt like it was good, but nothing more than that. Like it was okay. And I feel like it's partly because it's very much a part of a genre that has emerged or maybe re-emerged over the last few years, which is a sort of sad female singer-songwriter with a slightly grungy influence. I think we've covered the likes of Soccer Mummy and Jay Som, who I think fit into a similar category. And another big example that I can think of is Snail Mail. So I think it takes a little something to stand out in this quite crowded genre at the minute. And while a lot of my favourite musicians tend to be solo female performers, I'm not entirely married to this particular subset of that. I'm not big on Soccer Mummy or Jay Som's okay, and Snail Mail I just didn't get really. But interesting in what you just said, Matt, about this being a bit of an album for travelling to, because this album really clicked for me one morning when I was out for a really sunny morning walk during the lockdown. And I think it kind of rose above those other albums that I've just mentioned for me. I think it had a few things that make it stand out a bit more. I think one is her voice. I don't think it's immediately attention grabbing, but I think it's a really measured vocal performance, and I think it doesn't have that whiny element that some of the other singers I mentioned have.
Yeah.
And now that you've said about Porridge Radio, I hadn't thought about it, but I'm just looking at my notes, and actually one of the things I'd said is that she has a real knack for building a song and sucking you in more as she ramps it up throughout the song, which is a similar thing, I think, to Porridge Radio. I think Perform For You is the best example of that. I think it starts really quietly and she's almost speaking, but then it has a real crescendo, and by the end of the song, her voice is really soaring. And interestingly, Matt talking about the bass tone on Blue Light, I'm now going to talk about the lyrics, which proves that you got the questions wrong at the start on it.
No, it proves I got them right. It proves I got them right. Come on.
Because Blue Light's my favourite song here. I think lyrically it's incredible throughout, but I think the first verse is just really captivating and involving. So it says, think I'll go somewhere else where I can't see it. You brush your teeth more than me. I feel so ashamed. But how can you be so rude about it? I feel it come inside me like a blue light turning on. And I think it shows that real storyteller knack, actually, for sort of leaving things unsaid.
I'm not sure it's better than Thank You for Making Me Happy, though. That's pretty profound. Come on.
It's a very different aim that she's going for, really, isn't it? It's a very different. That's why it's a very different album, because there is a completely different aim, I think. But the storytelling is great, and I think she really pulls you in. And after this album clicked with me, I couldn't really figure out why I hadn't been into it straight away. I think maybe I'd lumped it into this genre that I'm not that into and made assumptions about it. But in the end, it's another one that I was a really big fan of. So that's 3 out of 3 so far on this playlist.
Okay, that's good. That's unbelievable, in fact, isn't it? Yeah, never had that before, I don't think, have we? Wow.
No.
I've got to go back a while before, there's that many albums I've liked at the start of a playlist. But it was good.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got 2 left. I think I'll go first this time. I'm trying to. Cool. Let's go with Neil Young, shall we? The classic Harvest. That's one of his 800 albums he's got out. So, all in all, I really enjoyed this, and I think it would be fairly easy to say it's the best of the classics we've done to my taste, and I was quite surprised by that, because initially I thought I've heard his voice, and I've heard Neil Young before. I've heard his voice before. I've never been a fan. I've always found it kind of grating. And I just sort of found it to be, I had found it to be quite middle of the road. Actually, I think it's got some really interesting stuff going on and some real subtlety to it. And it's also on a kind of tolerable cusp between country and folk. Folk, which I really like and like increasingly, country, which I've never liked and always try and keep away from me at all times if possible. So it's on the tolerable cusp between those two things, and his voice has kind of won me over time. It seems beautifully kind of pained in a pathetic way. I mean, like genuine pathos, singing about the deaths, drug deaths, and his father's role in his life, and these kind of things. So I thought it really carried along well. This is also going to be the case because I'm terrified of Jill's opinion, my wife's opinion, if I don't say I love this album, because she's one of my favourite eyes, so she'll kill me. Probably my favourite moment was on Needle and Damage Done. There's a melodic drop as he sings the actual Damage Done part as like an aside, da 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 da, and it just drops down. It's so beautifully done. It really really carries the song through. So so I loved it. I really loved it. I thought
your favourite classic we've ever done.
I don't know. It's up there. It's definitely up there. Yeah. I'm trying to think what else would be close that I've liked.
Biggie.
Yeah, I think I like it more than Biggie.
It's a tough comparison, isn't it, really? Biggie and Neil Young.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a strange one. Yeah.
A little bit different.
Yeah, so yeah, that's me on Neil Young. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. Who wants to go? Matt? Fran.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of flabbergasted that you like it so much. I thought you'd hate it. That's my main opinion right now. Personally, I was really excited for this because I know a lot of people who love Neil Young. I know people who've got similar taste to me really like him.
This sounds bad. I've got to say, this sounds like it's going to go bad.
Well, to be honest, in the end, I just thought it was okay. Like, it was nothing mind blowing, but it was listenable. I mean, there's some real highlights. There's 2 real highlights, but they were songs I already knew. The Needle and the Damage Done, which you've just mentioned, is great. It's a fantastic song. I liked Heart of Gold. But there's also times on this album, and I'm particularly thinking of A Man Needs a Maid, when I wanted to throw my speaker out the window. That song is terrible. But I'd say most of the songs fall somewhere in between that, though. I think to be honest, I couldn't name another song other than those 3 off the top of my head because they were very forgettable, I found. So I think it's kind of very middle of the road, which is a term you used, Nick. That was the term that was right out of everything you said. Everything else you said was wrong. Apart from what you said about The Needle and the Damage Done, which is a really, really good song. But yeah, so it's nothing spectacular, but not terrible for me. And I think it maybe suffered a little bit from being on a playlist, which I was quite into a lot of stuff. So I never felt like going to this one.
Quite disappointing because I would have thought you'd have to concede there's an awful lot of folk music that's come out been rooted in this artist.
Absolutely, which is why I was excited by it, really, because it's my genre in a lot of ways. But then, interestingly, I've just written an article for the website about how that idea of things that are recent not maybe being as good as the classics, and do we need to compare them? I think sometimes the classics, they might influence people. It doesn't mean that they're best, does it? So. For me, yeah, it just didn't do it for me, which I am disappointed because I wanted it to. But.
Just to be clear, you're saying you wrote an article for pickybs.com,
yes,
the website, which we have as well, and it's fantastic.
Yes, it's not live yet, this article, so I mean, don't go just.
But there's lots of other stuff that's great.
Yeah.
So just wanted to mention
it probably will be by the time the podcast comes out.
Good point.
Well, not unless Nick really drags his heels.
I might though. I'm tempted.
Okay.
All right. So Matt, go for it. What do you reckon?
So. I've heard of Neil Young, but I've never actually listened to any of his songs.
Really? Wow.
Never heard the Needle and the Damage Done before?
I'd never listened to the Needle one.
Needle one.
Listening to the album, I've written no notes about it, and I don't have any idea which song you're talking about. So it obviously, to me, in the context of the album, is pretty forgivable. I was surprised about how whiny his voice was. I was expecting some like macho, like country folk stuff that was maybe more akin to like, I don't know, Heart of Gold maybe, but beefier. And instead we got A Man Needs a Maid. And
A Man Needs a Maid's horrible.
That song frustrated me so much. I was just like, go and fucking cook yourself, you idiot. We've talked about I guess sexism in other genres, and this was just like, for fuck's sake, what are you talking about, man? Like, come on.
How could you write a song about that?
Yeah, getting beyond that though, like there were some, like I mentioned Heart of Gold, I did quite like that. I felt like that would be a perfect song to, it kind of epitomizes the idea of getting a open top car and driving across America. The twangy guitars, everything about it just felt like this is road trip music. This is exploring in the Midwest or something. That said, generally, I think this album, I compare it to some of you talked about the other classics we've covered.
Yeah.
Compare it to some of the other American big hitters like Springsteen, even Dolly Parton. This, I don't think, comes anywhere near.
I'll go as far as to say it's better than that bloody Bruce Springsteen album, but that's as far as I'll go.
It's better than Bruce Springsteen. It's got some intimacy to it which you actually care about. Nothing in the Bruce Springsteen album I cared about at all.
Not even the song about racing cars.
It was just, it's just him shouting to 40,000 people at once. You know, it meant nothing to me personally.
I don't think I really liked the Springsteen album that much either. I just
like this more.
that was better.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's the worst album on this playlist and one of the worst classics we've done.
Wow.
Okay.
That's a real range of opinions on the album, isn't it?
It really is. Wow. Thankfully
hell.
for you, Matt, you're in a different country from Jill because she would come and kick your ass otherwise. So yeah, she's not happy with anyone who's down on him.
You've got to make sure she listens to this episode then.
I'll try and get her to, yeah. She only finds us too bloody miserable to listen to, so, you know.
Now at least I understand why you are pretending to like this album, Nick. Because you don't like this album. There is no way you like this album.
I actually do. So we've got one left to go. Who wants to start on Childish Gambino?
Shall I start? I don't think I've started yet, have I? I didn't. I'll start anyway.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'll start because I find this quite a difficult album to speak about. I don't expect any great insights from me here, but what I'll say is after the first couple of listens, this album got pretty tired for me pretty quickly. I've been looking forward to listening to an album from Donald Glover ever since This Is America. That was the first musical thing of his that I spent any time with, and I loved it. It's just an amazing song. But nothing on this album comes even close to that. I think he has a few good hooks here, and that's it really. The whole album kind of feels really, really throwaway. He couldn't bother to name the tracks. He couldn't bother to name the album. He couldn't bother to finish writing the songs other than the choruses, really. And I don't think he could even be bothered to actually get the album mixed properly. It's very sort of tinny. It's very underproduced. And there aren't actually many times on this album where I feel like he cares about anything, the music or anything else. It just doesn't seem to care. And I don't know what any of the songs are about. So for me, it was a real disappointment in the end. I think at first I kind of tried to convince myself I liked it because I wanted to like it. I like him as a person, and I think he's a good actor. He's a funny comedian. I love Atlanta. It's a fucking brilliant program. But this album was by far the worst album on this list by a long, long way.
But Fran, which did you prefer out of 35-31 or 32-22?
Oh, surely. God. You know what? I started to write down a couple of song titles like, well, this 1920 was not too bad. But then I thought, no, he doesn't care, so I don't care. He can fuck off. So I didn't. So yeah, that's where I landed on. The only album on this playlist that I really disliked.
Okay. Maybe I'll jump in, Matt, if that's all right.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
So I had also heard America... what's it called?
This is America.
This is America. And I thought it was really good and obviously an amazing piece of art with the video for it as well. Although this will piss off Fran, I think, but I felt like it was a very watered down version of Clipping in terms of this musical sort of synths and the kind of crazy builds and the crazy kind of distortion sounds and stuff. So in that sense, I was quite excited to hear this album as well, like Fran had been. And at the opening, the 0.00, it was quite an interesting sort of open, sort of creating some sort of breathing room for the album, which I thought was quite ambitious and gave the impression that it was going to be a really big album. And I mentioned as well that I'd kind of got the impression that this was going to be a pop album, partly because it's got things like features of Ariana Grande's on it. And I'd assumed, I'd been thinking more and more, like we talked about in past episodes, about why I've got a problem with pop. And I think if there's something that I think pop should have and needs to have, it's really interesting hooks, like really memorable, addictive earworm hooks. But as you get into this album further, I think you discover that that's not really there. Our algorithm, for example, is melodically, I thought, pretty weak. It fell flat to me, basically, as an opening proper song after this kind of synthy, dreamy opening 0.00. Then after that, we got the Ariana Grande feature on Time, which is also pretty forgettable, I think. I mean,
I didn't even notice that, to be honest.
I would be
she was on it.
I'd be pretty surprised if people were sort of humming along to that one as they go through it. It just seemed to drift right past you. And then I think he carried on in that vein. There's a lot of kind of things thrown around. I don't think it was that well developed. I don't know about production wise, but in terms of creation of the music. But I didn't think that any of it sort of stuck with me in an addictive way. And I was trying my best to listen to it in the way that I think it was intended to be listened to in terms of as a pop album. But even then, I don't think it really carried very far. So I was pretty disappointed, to be honest. Okay, Matt, what's your
so like everyone, I was excited for this album to come out. But more from I've been a fan of his work for a while. All of his previous albums, specifically Awaken My Love, his last album, which was sensational, and I urge everyone to go listen to that instead of this album, because I was pretty disappointed. I think I was specifically when you talk about how it started. I thought the album started, I thought we were going to get this like really heady kind of hip hop album, some more interesting kind of expansive soundscapes and things like that. And I think it just gave way to a bit of a mess. And I think he's really trying to do something, and he is always trying to do something. And it's definitely not a home run with this. I think at times his worst criticism for especially his older albums was that he was like a light version of Kanye, and I can actually see some of his weird experimentalism and weird just throwing shit at the wall in the middle of this, and towards the later end of this album. It does sound a lot like some of Kanye's more recent projects.
I did hear someone say it was like a bad version of, and I've not listened to My Beautiful Twisted Dark Fantasy or whatever it's called, but I have heard that comparison made quite a bit.
Yeah, and there's other songs like I think the really abrasive one, 3222, that sticks out to you guys. That one reminds me of Black Skinhead, from, I forget which album that's from like 8 years ago, roughly. And then to be fair as well, he also includes one of the songs from his that he released last summer as well. As part of
changed the title, right? Took away the actual name of the song and put a fucking number instead.
Yeah, so that feels like summer, which was like one of the a fantastic pairing to This Is America. It was already a great song. It's already out there. It's already found its audience. It doesn't need to be bedded in to this, where it doesn't fit. Which I think the overall tone of this is a bit of a hot mess. So actually having a good song on it really confused me. But I would say again, everyone should go. You could go to Spotify, listen to maybe his top 5 songs that aren't on this album, and then listen to the whole of Awaken My Love, which is completely is a different genre. And
how recent is that album?
It's from 4 years ago, I think, 3 or 4. Right. It's one of the albums I'm going to buy on record because it's that good. It's on my list.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's all the 5. What do we think before I get into the why I love stuff about this playlist? It sounds like we've done pretty positive thoughts from Fran's point of view, at least.
Fair? It was a good playlist for me. 3 albums that I really liked a lot, and I'd say they all switched places at times as my favourite on the list. The Jessie Reyez, the Brooke Bentham, and the Porridge Radio. I think I ended up with the Jessie Reyez just because that I always enjoyed that. The other 2 I maybe had to be in the right mood for. But yeah, really good playlist. I mean, I could live without ever hearing Neil Young again.
You're not going to manage that, are you? To be honest, he's everywhere. So
no, I'd have to stop watching All American Television, wouldn't I? So
I've made it this far.
You've definitely heard songs by him, mate, and you've definitely heard The Needle and the Damage Done. There's no way in the world you've not heard him. I mean, Heart of Gold's on like every margarine advert that's ever existed, basically. So you've definitely heard that. But yeah, and then Childish Gambino just could have been lifted away from this, then I would have been happier. But it was a good playlist.
All right, Matt, what did you think of the playlist overall?
I think this was probably the playlist I've been most excited about for a very long time, and because of that reason, I'm a bit disappointed. And I think the albums I did like, I only liked. There's nothing really has stuck with me, and is going to be added to my permanent rotation of albums. Yeah. So. Yeah,
I would agree with that. Nothing's going to be out on my permanent rotation, although it won't matter because Neil Young is on Jill's permanent rotation anyway around the house. So I'll be hearing it all the time.
I'm interested in what Jill thinks of A Man Needs a Maid, because, you know...
I haven't asked her that specific question.
Can you ask her and get back to us, please?
I'll report back on that one, definitely, no problem. Yeah. I think she probably won't be that cool with it, but my guess. But as a general thing, I think she's really into him, She is really into him. Okay, so may I introduce the horrors then? Why I love the horrors, yes. Okay, so I put a playlist together and I put it through with some representation from all the 5 albums. You'll probably notice that there's a lot more tracks from some of the albums than others, which I'll get more back to in a minute. But I just wanted to make sure we had some kind of narrative across the whole of the horrors sort of discography. I'll give you some context first of all. I heard about them when I heard about them being shortlisted for Mercury, and this might have been 7 years ago or something like that, 7 or 8 years ago, for Primary Colours. So I was always a massive Mercury fan, as everyone knows, so I was always keen to sort of check anything out that was on that list. And then I discovered it was co-produced by Jeff Barrow of Portishead, which made an even more exciting proposition. So, I was really, really looking forward to being sort of wowed by this album. When I actually heard the album the first time, though, I was actually driving on the motorway from Heathrow to Bristol, having flown all night from the US to Britain and had absolutely no sleep at all. And I was completely dizzy with exhaustion and sort of trying to hold it together. And despite that, though, the album's sort of twists and turns and the kind of violent undertones that it kind of carries through a lot of it sort of managed to keep me awake for a couple, I think maybe 2 or 3 complete run-throughs of the album. So I was really, really compelled almost immediately by it, and I've sort of stuck with them since then. I can give you a few things that I specifically love about them. I love how they build songs from the lowest frequencies to the highest. They carry a lot of songs on the bass parts and on the kick drums, and not as much on the guitars. So structurally, the guitars in some of the tracks could actually be removed, and the songs would still be able to sort of move forward, which I always found really fascinating. It's something that they're not the first band in history to do that, but I think they do it really, really well. So the bass tone and the kick drums that really mix well all the way through all their projects. Even the first one, which was done, I think, on a very small budget, the Strange House album. I really love the fact they care about tone so much, and this is where the guitar does come back in, because the guitarist acts as somebody who just dresses the songs in unbelievably interesting, like, distortion and delay effects and various different kinds of odd sort of twists and turns. So I think that really makes for a fascinating proposition. A song that's driving all the way through on the basis of the bass parts, but then has this kind of interesting twists and twirls of guitar dressing at the top of it, which I love that as well. I also love the kind of the weirdly, I can only describe it as sort of a sickly dark mix of sort of sawtooth guitars on one side and then dreamy synths as well, because they do have a synth player as well in the band. It's a 5-piece band. And a lot of the distortion is on the synth side, but a lot of it is often also very clean, actually, and sits with the right next to these guitars very kind of abruptly, and I find that a really interesting mix of sort of direction. So that's really cool as well. I love how they've moved on a kind of journey from punk and goth in the first couple of tracks you've seen from Strange House, particularly Georgia Pan, which is a really vicious song, I think, to be honest. That kind of punk goth aesthetic into much more synth pop, and then back to sort of something that's sort of close to metal, shoegaze metal maybe. You still know it's them though all the way through because of the way they build these songs. So they've changed directions at lots of points, but they've always kind of kept some consistency underlying that. I think Whole New Way, which is right in the middle of this playlist, actually is the biggest turn in the way they've written stuff before that point. And then I think Whole New Way was a single actually first, separate from any of the albums. And then after that, Skying and Luminous, the next two albums were much more sort of dreamy and sort of delicate and sort of calmer almost on a certain level, before V then turned back again to something a bit more heavy and dark. So they've gone on an interesting journey that I've been kind of fascinated to follow all the way through. They've come almost, not full circle, but V5 is very like Strange House, much more so than Luminous is, for example, the one before it. And I find that really interesting as well. I wouldn't say that the discography is even, which is why I mentioned at the start there are 5 songs from Primary Colours, only 1 from Luminous, Jealous Sun, which is a great track, but certainly it does imply, I think, correctly that they sort of lost their way a little bit at some of the points when they went to the sort of more synth pop areas, and then they've kind of come back with V, which I think is a really excellent album. It's kind of possibly their best after Primary Colours. So, I mean, even though I will say that Jealous Sun is a fantastic track, that the weight of the sound of that distortion when it comes in on the opening of Jealous Sun is, it almost slows down under its own weight. That's the impression I get. It kind of can't keep up the pace of the song because it's so heavy. So I love that kind of mix of tones. So yeah, I think that's most of what I wanted to say. They're really a fascinating band. Oh, I will say one more thing is vocally, I think the kind of scrawl that he sings a lot of times, particularly on Georgia Pan, is a great example. New Ice Age is another one, where he kind of screams through songs in a way that works like the guitars. It cuts through a lot of the rest of the tune, and yet, as I said before, the bass still carries the melody all the way through. So the song doesn't fall apart at any point, but it still has those jagged edges, which I love that sort of dichotomy. So yeah, that's me. So what does anyone want to say about that? Anyone got any thoughts about that playlist? Hope you enjoyed it, either of you. Maybe we'll go with Matt first, maybe.
Yeah, I think a good time for me to jump in because I am also a massive fan of the Horrors. They're one of my favourite bands and have been on my long list of bands to cover for this segment. So
Too late.
Yeah, so you beat me to it. And I really like the way you put it together. And it's interesting listening to this after last time out when we did Metronomy, because they've been around at this kind of the same time, and the way you put the playlist together to kind of show the evolution of music style is very similar to the way I approach Metronomy.
Right.
And as with Metronomy, I've pretty much loved all the stages. The first album where it's melodramatic, it's mad. It feels like it could almost be novelty, but it's not.
Yeah, it's like I was going to say, it's like a kind of a fairground ride almost. It's like a kind of insane, terrifying nighttime fairground ride.
Yeah, like I remember, like when you watch a kids program and they go to the fairground and there's a terrifying person running the ride and they have distorted.
Somebody's tripping while they're doing it or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's totally like that. But then I feel like they grow so much and they give way to this much more atmospheric, genuine, real music that I think it's fantastic. Primary Colours is probably their best album, but I think you touched on it. There's obvious influences, and they are big post-punk essentially band. So I think I Can't Control Myself could be essentially a Joy Division song.
Yeah, there is
the
a lot
way
of Joy Division.
The drums are. But I'm not fussed by that. But for me, it's, Still Life is maybe it's in my top 100 songs of all time.
Really?
I'd say.
Wow.
I love that song. I still remember exactly listening to it for the first time. I was in lab in America, and listening to Zane Lowe, and he played it like two or three times in a row.
Okay.
Because he was so into it, and then I went straight onto YouTube as soon as it was out, and then I just listened. That was my soundtrack for months.
Wow.
Because it's so beautiful, so calming, so big and small at the same time. It's it feels intimate but massive. I love the Horrors. It's by far the saving grace of this playlist.
Okay, glad to hear it. So, Fran, how about it?
Okay, like the Neil Young, this is something I've been looking forward to listening to for quite a long time, really. I'm glad you did them because I don't know them very well. I've heard a few songs. You've spoken about them a lot, and several times you've played videos to me of their live performances, and I've always found them really interesting. And I'm really glad that you did a playlist rather than the album. I think it helped me to get an idea of them as their total career, which was interesting. And I enjoyed a lot of the playlist, but listening to you talk just now, what's the first album called again?
It's called Strange House.
So yeah, Strange House and then 5. I thought it was weird that I didn't really like the stuff at the start of the playlist and I didn't really like the stuff at the end of the playlist. But actually, from what you've just said, I suppose that makes sense because if they are kind of going back to what they started with, that I didn't love that stuff.
Interesting.
But I liked a lot of this playlist. But if I'm being totally honest, when I was listening to it, there were really 3 songs on the playlist that I was always really looking forward to and wanting to get to. And those 3 songs were Who Can Say, Scarlet Fields and Whole New Way. I think all 3 of those songs are absolutely exceptional.
Scarlet Fields was probably my favourite song of that year that it came out, whenever it was.
It's an amazing song. It's amazing. And I love all 3 of those songs.
Yeah.
But for me, they kind of soared way, way above anything else on the list.
You like the clean, dry drums then, don't you? I think all those 3 have really clean, dry drums.
Yeah, and I think that's into the other point that I kind of want to make about them. The associations we've just mentioned Joy Division, as we've mentioned nearly every episode with some band.
Yeah.
But I think this thing about is it derivative? Does that matter? Do I care? I don't know if I care, but it did feel the songs that I loved did feel very Joy Division. And I obviously love Joy Division. And I find that when I love something, like for example, I love that Murder Capital album, When I Have Fears, and I think in some ways it's very derivative, but I love it, so I don't give a shit that it's derivative. But when I don't totally love something, I notice that more. So when I didn't love all of this, I liked all of it, apart from the first couple of songs. I did wonder about whether that derivative thing matters and whether it annoys me a little bit. But so I'm not totally in love with them. I think what I will do is go away and listen to Primary Colours, because I think 2 of the songs I really liked were on Primary Colours.
Yeah.
Who Can Say and Scarlet Fields, right? They're both on the same album.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll go away and listen to that album, because even though I'm glad you did the playlist, often it is an album that I really connect to.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll listen to that album and see where I come from there. But
and I'm not. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean that's it really. I liked a lot of it, but I didn't. It's not like I fell in love and wanted to go away and listen to them exclusively, sort of thing.
I'm not shocked in a sense. I'm not shocked in a sense. I feel like that those first songs and some of the V stuff are very angular and abrasive in certain ways that I get the impression you're not generally that into. You know.
Yeah.
So I mean, Counting Fives is just a nasty song in for my mind the best possible way. But I think that's I can see how that doesn't gel sometimes. So but I do think it's interesting that connection. I'm just thinking about it out loud. Really, the V and Strange House have some similarities. I mean, I think V is a more ornate album and has more kind of layering and it's more lush in a certain way. Whereas Strange House, is smaller in scale. But I do think you're right. They're both heavier, darker than the other ones. Certainly than Skying, which is in general a very dreamy kind of synth-led album. So that's interesting.
I think I preferred the stuff on 5 to the stuff on
Strange House.
Album, the name I keep forgetting the name of. But yeah,
Strange
I think
House, yeah.
I could see obviously they developed more as a band, but I didn't love the stuff on 5. It wouldn't be something I'd rush to listen to.
Right. I would say 5 is up there with Primary Colour. Primary Colour is a better album, but there's not a hell of a lot in it, to be honest. I mean, I think Ghost has got some incredible tones, which I'm obsessed with that. So yeah, great. Okay, I think that's that then. Thanks for your feedback about it. So next time will be Matt's turn to host. So I will say I will be doing EOB's Earth and The Strokes, The New Abnormal. Fran?
So I'll be doing Fiona Apple's album Fetch the Bolt Cutters, which got a perfect 10 in Pitchfork, so that's interesting. And I'll be doing Rina Sawayama with her self-titled album. I think it's self-titled. Sawayama it's called, so yes it is. They're my two.
Cool. And so for the classic, we're going to be doing Yoko Ono and with her album Plastic Ono Band. And then I'm going to be talking about Jay-Z, and specifically we're going to be focusing on The Blueprint.
Okay, great. So please follow all the social media, which Fran will now tell us what it is. Please, Fran.
So it's Twitter, we're on @PickyBastards, capital B, capital B. Facebook, we are @The Picky Bastards. And I will say one more time, we are not the bluegrass band called The Picky Bastards, so don't follow them. Maybe follow them as well. I don't know anything about them.
Really don't.
But
Bluegrass
yeah,
band.
they stole our Facebook handle, so we have to be The Picky Bastards on Facebook.
Right, outrageous. So we are also in the midst of getting near the end of a big tournament. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Fran. It's on social.
Yeah, so
might be finishing up before we get this out, I suppose.
Yeah,
but there'll be other ones
say
coming.
by the time this podcast finishes, we will know what the best debut album of all time is. The quarterfinals are running today, and we've got Twilight Sad against Arcade Fire and The Streets against Pixies. There's Joy Division, Portishead, Massive Attack, and LCD Sound System to come. It's been a big tournament. It's been great. Yeah, there's been a lot of good albums.
Yeah, excellent. And we'll be doing more of those in the future. This is the second one of these we've done, and I'm sure there'll be more coming down the line. So
I've got a couple of ideas, which
I'll
probably tell you about now. But yeah.
Yeah. Lots of fun stuff on Twitter.
Absolutely. All right, great then. And again, our website is pickybs.com. That's that, I think. So I will see everyone later. Thanks a lot.
See you later, people.
Bye-bye.